The conference room smelled like recycled air and alien perfume. Ambassador Helen Ortiz sat at the long table, surrounded by creatures from worlds she had only read about in briefings. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few looked like they were made of living crystal. They all watched her with various types of eyes as she read through the document on her tablet. The Armament Control Treaty filled 200 pages with legal language, but the core message was simple. No energy weapons, no chemical explosives, no kinetic bombardment from orbit, no biological warfare, no nanite weapons. The list went on, banning everything that had made war horrible across the galaxy for the past 1,000 years. Helen glanced at Colonel Robert Hayes, who sat beside her in his dress uniform. He was reading the same document, but unlike the other military advisors in the room who looked worried, Hayes had a slight smile on his face. He caught her look and tapped a specific paragraph on his own tablet, then sent her a private message. "Read section 47, subsection 12, the message said. Helen found the section. It defined weapons by their technological signatures and energy outputs. It specified power sources and detection methods. It was very thorough about what counted as a banned weapon, but as she read it 3 times, she realized what Hayes had noticed. The treaty defined weapons by how advanced they were, not by how deadly they could be. High Minister Vrath of the Draven Empire spoke from across the table. His species looked like someone had crossed a lizard with a tank. Thick scales, powerful limbs, and a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. Humans take long time to read simple words. Perhaps your species not ready for galactic community. Several alien representatives made sounds that might have been laughter. Helen ignored them and kept her face calm. She had dealt with bullies before, just usually not ones that were 7 feet tall and covered in natural armor. "We just want to be thorough," Helen said. "This is an important document." "Important, yes," Vrath agreed. "It keep peace in galaxy. It stop warlike species from causing trouble. You humans sign or you stay in your little corner of space forever." Helen knew the threat was real. The Draven Empire controlled 36 systems and had been expanding aggressively for decades. Several human colony ships had reported Draven vessels harassing them near the frontier. Nothing violent yet, but plenty of intimidation. The kind of behavior that would get worse once Earth signed away its ability to defend itself with modern weapons, or so Vrath thought. "Colonel Hayes," Helen said aloud, "do you have any concerns about this treaty from a military perspective?" Hayes stood up, and every alien in the room turned to look at him. He was not a large man, and he looked almost fragile next to some of the species present, but he had been a professor of military history before joining the Earth Defense Force, and he spoke with quiet confidence. "Just one question for clarification," Hayes said. "The treaty bans weapons based on their use of advanced technology and energy signatures. Does this mean that purely mechanical devices operated by simple physical principles would be exempt?" The room went quiet. A representative from the Yathari species, who looked like a mantis wearing diplomat robes, consulted with their legal advisor. After a moment, they spoke in their clicking language, which the translation device rendered as, "Mechanical devices without power sources or explosive propellants are not classified as weapons under this treaty. They are considered tools or antiques." "Antiques," Hayes repeated, and his smile grew wider. "Thank you for the clarification." Helen understood immediately. She picked up her stylus and signed the document with a flourish. "On behalf of Earth and all human colonies, I accept the terms of the Armament Control Treaty. We look forward to peaceful cooperation with all galactic species." High Minister Vrath looked pleased with himself. He probably thought he had just disarmed a potential rival. The other species representatives seemed relieved that humanity had agreed without argument. They all signed in turn, using whatever appendages their species possessed for writing. The ceremony ended with formal words about peace and cooperation. Refreshments were served, though Helen politely declined anything that might be toxic to human biology. She made small talk with various ambassadors, learning names and political positions. Hayes stood nearby, already typing messages on his personal communication device. 3 hours later, back in the human embassy, Helen and Hayes sat in a secure room. The walls were lined with technology that prevented any form of surveillance. "How fast can we move on this?" Helen asked. Hayes pulled up several files on the main display. Blueprints filled the screen, designs that looked like they belonged in a museum, not a military arsenal. I already sent preliminary orders before we left for the treaty signing. We have historical experts standing by, engineers ready to adapt old designs and production facilities that can be retasked within a week. The Draven won't wait long, Helen said. They have been pushing at our colonies for months. Now that they think we are disarmed, they will push harder. Let them, Hayes said. He zoomed in on one of the blueprints. It showed a device made of wood and rope, simple and ancient. We will be ready, and we will be completely legal. The message came 2 days later. A human mining colony on Tau Station out on the frontier sent a distress call. Draven warships had surrounded the station and were demanding surrender. They claimed the station was in disputed territory and that the miners had to leave immediately or face consequences. Helen brought the message to the Galactic Council, but the response was exactly what she expected. The Council would investigate. They would send observers. They would schedule discussions. Everything would take time, and everyone knew it. The Draven had played this game before with other species. Helen sent her response directly to the Draven fleet commander at Tau Station. The message was brief and professional. The colony of Tau Station is legally established human territory. Your demand is rejected. We are preparing our response. It will be fully compliant with all galactic treaties. High Minister Vrath himself replied within the hour. The video message showed him in what looked like a throne room, surrounded by other Draven officials. You have no weapons, human. You signed them away. Surrender station or we take it by force. You have 1 planetary rotation to decide. Helen deleted the message and turned to Hayes. How long until the fleet is ready? 48 hours, Hayes said. The first wave is loading now. We are going to teach the galaxy a history lesson they will never forget. Helen walked to the window of her office and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human colonists were afraid, wondering if Earth would abandon them. But Earth had not abandoned anyone. Earth had just found a loophole big enough to fly a warship through, or in this case, big enough to launch a trebuchet through. She smiled at her reflection in the glass. The Draven thought they had forced humanity into a corner. They thought wrong. Humans had been finding creative solutions to impossible problems since they lived in caves and hunted with pointed sticks. The technology had changed over the millennia, but the fundamental principle remained the same. When someone tried to take away your weapons, you found new ones. Or in humanity's case, you remembered the old ones. Contact Tau Station, Helen said. Tell them help is coming. Tell them to hold on for 2 more days. And tell them the Draven are about to learn why you should never back a human into a corner. Hayes sent the message, and somewhere in a converted shipyard orbiting Luna, the sound of hammers on steel rang out like a battle cry echoing across the centuries. William Chen held the crossbow like it was made of glass, even though he knew it could survive being thrown off a building. The weapon was beautiful in a way that only engineers could appreciate. Carbon fiber limbs shaped like wings, a trigger mechanism made from aerospace-grade titanium, and a rail system that would make a bolt fly faster than most people could blink. How much force? Asked the young soldier standing next to him. William checked the gauge. 1,200 pounds of draw weight. In Earth gravity, this bolt will punch through 6 inches of steel plate. In zero gravity, it will go through a lot more. The soldier, who could not have been more than 20 years old, whistled softly. And this does not count as a weapon under the treaty? Not according to galactic law, William said. He handed the crossbow over carefully. It is purely mechanical. No power source. No explosives. No energy signature. Just physics and engineering. As far as the treaty is concerned, this is a sporting tool. They stood in what had once been a commercial shipyard, but now looked more like a workshop from 500 years ago. Except instead of village blacksmiths, there were precision manufacturing robots. Instead of wood and iron, there were composite materials and advanced alloys. And instead of making weapons for knights and soldiers, they were making weapons for space warfare. The facility orbited Luna, hidden from casual observation, but making no real effort to hide what it was doing. After all, there was nothing illegal about it. The Armament Control Treaty had been very specific about what counted as a weapon, and humanity had read that treaty very carefully. Colonel Hayes walked between the workstations, observing the production with the eye of someone who understood both the history and the application. He stopped at a massive frame being assembled by 3 robots working in perfect coordination. Is this the trebuchet? He asked the engineer supervising the work. The woman nodded. She wore coveralls marked with the logo of Chen Defense Solutions. the company that William had founded 3 days after the treaty was signed. Mark 7 siege engine, designed for zero-gravity operation. We have replaced the traditional counterweight with a compressed spring system, but the basic principles are the same as medieval designs. It will launch a projectile up to half a ton at significant velocity. Hayes ran his hand along the frame. How many can we produce per week? With current capacity, 40 units. But we are expanding. Give us a month and we can triple that number. We might not have a month, Hayes said. The Draven are already moving. Prioritize quality over quantity for now. I want every weapon tested and certified. The engineer saluted casually. Understood, Colonel. Every bolt that leaves this facility could save a life. We are not taking chances. Across the facility, Captain Diana Foster drilled with her unit in a section that had been converted into a training area. The soldiers wore armor that looked medieval, but was made from materials that could stop energy weapons and survive hard vacuum. They carried crossbows and short swords, shields and pikes. From a distance, they looked like knights preparing for a crusade. Diana called a halt to the exercise and gathered her squad around her. 15 soldiers, all veterans, all volunteers for this experimental unit. They had been training for 2 weeks straight, learning skills that their ancestors had forgotten centuries ago. Listen up, Diana said. I know some of you think this is crazy. I know it feels strange to train with bows and swords when you're used to plasma rifles and smart missiles. But this is going to work. The enemy has spent centuries optimizing their defenses against modern weapons. They have shields that stop energy beams. They have point defense systems that track missiles. They have armor designed to dissipate heat and explosive force. She held up a crossbow bolt. It was as long as her forearm, made of tungsten with a diamond-hard tip. This is invisible to their sensors. It does not have a heat signature. It does not emit any energy they can track. And when it hits their hull at 2,000 meters per second, their shields will not stop it because shields are designed to stop energy, not solid matter moving through space. One of the soldiers raised a hand. What about boarding actions, Captain? Their corridors are designed for energy weapon combat. Wide sight lines, reflective surfaces, defensive positions. Diana smiled, which makes them perfect for crossbow combat. A bolt does not bounce off walls. It does not give away your position with a muzzle flash. And in close quarters, a weapon that fires a solid projectile will outperform a beam weapon every time. We have been running simulations. The numbers are on our side. The soldiers looked at each other and Diana could see them starting to believe. They were professional fighters, and professionals respected anything that worked, no matter how old-fashioned it seemed. One more thing, Diana added, the psychological factor. The Draven think they are superior. They think they have better technology, better tactics, better everything. When they see us coming at them with bows and swords, they are going to laugh. Right up until the moment they realize we are winning. Never underestimate the power of unexpected tactics. Training continued throughout the facility. Soldiers learned to fire crossbows in rotating environments. Engineers tested trebuchets in simulated combat scenarios. Technicians practiced loading mechanisms and maintenance procedures. Every person in the facility understood that they were part of something unprecedented in galactic history. A reporter arrived on the 3rd week of production. Her name was Tix, and she was from a species that looked like someone had combined a bird with a diplomat. Colorful feathers, 3 eyes, and a voice that sounded like music. She represented one of the largest news networks in the galaxy, and she had heard rumors about what humans were building. William gave her a tour personally. He showed her the crossbows, the trebuchets, the armor, and the training facilities. He explained the physics and the engineering. He was completely honest about everything because there was nothing to hide. Tix recorded everything with her camera drones, and her 3 eyes blinked in what William had learned was her species' version of confusion. But Ambassador Chen, these are antiques. These are museum pieces. Surely you do not intend to fight a modern military force with such primitive tools. We do, William said simply. And we will win. The Draven have energy shields and advanced targeting systems. They have warships that can level cities. How can mechanical devices compete with that? William picked up a crossbow bolt and held it up to the light. This bolt is made from tungsten carbide with a diamond-coated tip. It weighs 3 pounds. When fired from our crossbows in zero gravity, it will travel at speeds that make it effectively a kinetic weapon. The Draven shields are tuned to stop energy and deflect explosive force. They are not designed to stop solid projectiles because no one has used solid projectiles in warfare for 1,000 years. We are exploiting a blind spot in their defenses. Tix's feathers ruffled in what might have been skepticism. "And if this does not work? Then we will try something else," William said. "Humans are good at adapting. It is what we do." The interview aired across the galaxy that evening. Most species watched it with amusement. Some with curiosity. The Draven watched it with contempt. High Minister Vrath himself gave a statement calling the human effort pathetic and desperate, and promising that human colonies would soon learn the price of defiance. But in the shipyards around Luna, production continued. More crossbows, more trebuchets, more soldiers trained in ancient tactics adapted for space warfare. The first combat fleet began loading equipment, and the crews worked with the focused intensity of people who knew lives depended on their efforts. Hayes stood in the command center, watching the loading process on multiple screens. Helen Ortiz arrived to observe, and together, they watched as the first warship sealed its cargo bay. The vessel was not impressive to look at. It had been a commercial hauler before being hastily converted for military use. But its cargo hold was filled with siege equipment, and its crew was trained in tactics that the galaxy had forgotten. "How many ships in the first wave?" Helen asked. 12, Hayes replied. "Not enough to fight a traditional engagement, but enough for what we need to do. The Draven have given the Tau Station colonists 48 hours. We will arrive with 6 hours to spare. And if we lose?" Hayes did not look away from the screens. "Then we learn from our mistakes and try again. But we will not lose. The Draven are expecting a fight with modern weapons. They are preparing for energy beams and missiles. They are going to get arrows and siege engines instead. The shock alone will give us an advantage." Helen watched a trebuchet being secured in a cargo bay. It looked absurd, a medieval weapon being loaded onto a spaceship. But she had read the tactical analysis. She had seen the simulations. She trusted Hayes and his team of historians-turned-warriors. "The galaxy thinks we are crazy," she said. "The galaxy thought a lot of things about humans were crazy," Hayes replied. "They thought we were crazy for exploring space in chemical rockets. They thought we were crazy for settling hostile worlds. They thought we were crazy for joining the galactic community when we were so far behind technologically. Being underestimated is our greatest advantage." The last ship finished loading, and the fleet prepared for departure. 12 ships carrying weapons that belonged in a museum, crewed by soldiers trained in ancient warfare. They would travel to Tau Station, and they would face the Draven Empire in battle, and they would show the galaxy that sometimes the oldest solutions were the best ones. The Draven battle fleet hung in space like predators circling wounded prey. Admiral Cross observed Tau Station through the viewport of his flagship, noting the weak defenses and outdated systems. The human mining colony had perhaps 300 civilians and no military presence worth mentioning. "This would be easy. Status of their defenses?" Cross asked his tactical officer. "Minimal, Admiral. Basic meteor defense grid, standard commercial shields. No weapon systems detected. They are broadcasting requests for us to withdraw, but they have nothing to back up their words." Cross felt satisfaction in his chest. The humans had made themselves weak by signing the Armament Control Treaty. Now the Draven Empire would claim their resources and expand its territory. Other species would see this and understand that defying the Draven had consequences. "Incoming vessels," the sensor officer announced suddenly, 12 ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. "They are human registry. Military vessels?" Cross asked. The sensor officer checked their readings twice before answering. "Negative, Admiral. They appear to be converted cargo haulers. I am detecting some unusual configurations, but no weapon signatures, no energy weapon charging, no missile locks. They are just sitting there." Cross moved to the sensor display himself. The human ships had positioned themselves between his fleet and Tau Station. They were holding formation, but not taking any aggressive actions. Their cargo bays were open, which was strange. And inside those bays, the sensors were picking up shapes that made no sense in modern warfare. "What am I looking at?" Cross demanded. The tactical officer magnified the image. Inside the human cargo bays were large mechanical devices made of metal and composite materials. They looked like industrial equipment or perhaps art installations. Nothing that registered as a threat to military sensors. "Unknown, Admiral. The devices appear to be purely mechanical. No power signatures. No explosive materials. They could be mining equipment or construction tools. Or they could be trying to intimidate us with farming equipment," another officer suggested. and several Draven in the command center made sounds of amusement. Cross opened a communication channel to the lead human vessel. A woman in a military uniform appeared on the screen. She looked young and completely calm despite facing a fleet that could destroy her ships with ease. "I am Admiral Cross of the Draven Imperial Fleet. You are interfering with legitimate territorial claims. Withdraw immediately or face destruction." The human woman smiled slightly. "I am Captain Diana Foster of the Earth Defense Force. Tau Station is human territory recognized by the Galactic Council. You are in violation of multiple treaties. Withdraw your forces now. You have no weapons," Cross said. "You signed them away. What do you plan to fight with?" Harsh language. Diana's smile grew wider. "We have weapons, Admiral. They are just not the kind you are used to. Last chance. Leave peacefully or we will make you leave." Cross terminated the connection and turned to his weapons officer. "Target their lead ships. Fire a warning shot across their bow. Let them see what real weapons look like." Energy beams lanced out from the Draven cruisers, deliberately missing the human vessels but coming close enough to demonstrate power. The beams would have vaporized an unshielded ship. They were meant to terrify and intimidate. Instead, Captain Foster's voice came over an open channel that every ship in the area could hear. Just one word, spoken calmly. "Loose." What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. The mechanical devices in the human cargo bays activated. They were not powered by engines or computers. They were operated by springs, by tension, by gravity and momentum. They were trebuchets and ballistas and crossbow mechanisms, scaled up to sizes that would have impressed medieval warlords. Hundreds of projectiles launched simultaneously. Tungsten bolts 3 meters long, ceramic spheres filled with corrosive chemicals, steel balls wrapped in sharp fragments, all of them traveling at speeds that turned them into kinetic weapons. The Draven point defense systems did not react. Those systems were designed to track missiles and incoming fire with heat signatures and energy readings. These projectiles had no heat signature. They did not emit energy. They were just solid objects flying through space according to basic physics. The bolts hit shields designed to stop energy weapons, and the shields did nothing. The projectiles passed through like the shields were not even there, because shields worked by generating opposing energy fields. They could not generate opposing energy to something that had no energy signature. The first bolt hit Admiral Cross's flagship just below the bridge section. It punched through the hull armor like the armor was made of paper. The tungsten tip, traveling at over 2,000 meters per second, carried so much kinetic force that it kept going, punching through 3 internal decks before finally lodging in the ship's secondary reactor shielding. Alarms screamed throughout the flagship. Cross felt the deck shudder under his feet as more impacts struck. On the tactical display, damage reports flooded in from across the fleet. Ships that had been pristine moments ago were now showing hull breaches, system failures, and casualties. "Return fire," Cross shouted. "All ships, engage the enemy." The Draven fleet opened up with everything they had. Energy beams powerful enough to melt mountains. Plasma torpedoes that could vaporize asteroids. All of it directed at the human ships with lethal precision. The human shields held, at least partially. They were not advanced shields, but they were tuned for energy weapons, and that was what the Draven were using. Some beams got through and damaged human hulls, but the damage was far less than it should have been. And while the Draven fired their impressive weapons, the humans kept launching their simple projectiles. More bolts, more ceramic spheres that shattered against hulls and released chemicals that ate through armor. More clouds of metal fragments that tore through external sensors and communication arrays. "They are launching boarding craft," the sensor officer yelled. Small ships detached from the human fleet. They were basic transport pods, the kind used for moving cargo between stations, but they had been modified with mechanical grappling systems and armored shells. They latched onto damaged Draven vessels like parasites. And then human soldiers began cutting their way inside. Admiral Cross watched in disbelief as his fleet, a force that had conquered a dozen systems, struggled against weapons that belonged in a museum. The humans were not using anything that the treaty banned. They were using physics, simple, brutal, undeniable physics. Inside the Draven ships, the boarding actions went even worse. Sergeant Lucas Grant led his team through the corridors of a Draven cruiser, his crossbow raised and ready. The corridor was wide and well lit, designed for energy weapon combat where you needed clear sight lines and reflective surfaces to avoid friendly fire. For crossbow combat, It was perfect. A group of Draven soldiers appeared at the far end of the corridor carrying energy rifles. They raised their weapons to fire, but crossbow bolts struck them before they could pull their triggers. The bolts made no sound except the impact. No warning. No muzzle flash to give away positions. The Draven fell, their armor penetrated by projectiles that their shields did nothing to stop. Their rifles clattered to the deck, useless against enemies who fought with weapons from another age. Grant's team moved through the ship systematically. Crossbows in zero gravity were brutally effective. No recoil to throw off your aim. No sound to alert enemies. Just silent death delivered with mechanical precision. Bridge secured, Grant reported over the communication line. We have control of the ship's systems. Requesting instructions. Captain Foster's voice came back calm and professional. Hold position. Secure any prisoners. Do not harm anyone who surrenders. We are here to send a message, not commit massacre. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted 40 minutes. By the end, 3 Draven cruisers were disabled and boarded. 2 destroyers were venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. The rest of the Draven fleet was pulling back, their commanders unable to comprehend what had just happened. Admiral Cross stood on his damaged bridge, watching the human ships hold their position. They had not pursued. They had not tried to destroy the retreating vessels. They had simply proven their point and stopped. A communication request came from Captain Foster. Cross accepted it, and the human woman appeared on his screen again, still calm, still professional. Admiral, I am transmitting our damage assessment and casualty reports to you. We disabled your ships, but we minimized loss of life wherever possible. Your wounded are being treated by our medical teams. Your crew will be returned to you once the situation is resolved. Cross said nothing. What could he say? He had been defeated by arrows and bolts. I suggest you contact High Minister Vrath, Foster continued. Tell him that the humans are not defenseless. Tell him that we read the treaty very carefully, and tell him that if he wants to continue this conflict, we have plenty more where this came from. The screen went dark. Cross looked around his bridge at the damaged systems and injured crew. His tactical officer was being treated for a head wound. His sensor array was half destroyed by fragments from a ceramic sphere. His proud flagship looked like it had fought a battle against a superior force, which in a way it had. Get me High Minister Vrath, Cross said quietly. And someone explained to me how we lost a battle to weapons that should be in a museum. Nobody had an answer. But across the galaxy, every species with military intelligence was downloading the footage from the battle. They were analyzing the tactics, they were examining the weapons, and they were all realizing the same thing. The Armament Control Treaty had a loophole big enough to fly a medieval siege engine through. And humanity had found it, the footage, played on every screen in the Galactic Council chamber, and nobody spoke. Representatives from hundreds of worlds watched human soldiers firing crossbows in space. They watched medieval siege weapons launching projectiles that tore through modern warships. They watched an empire that had conquered dozens of systems, retreat in confusion from weapons that predated spaceflight. Ambassador Helen Ortiz stood at the speaker's podium, waiting for the footage to end. She had watched it a dozen times already, but she never got tired of seeing Admiral Cross's expression when the first bolt hit his flagship. The moment of confusion, followed by the slow realization that his entire tactical doctrine had just become obsolete. The footage ended. The lights in the chamber came back up. Silence filled the vast room for several long seconds before everyone started talking at once. The council speaker, an elderly being from a species that looked like mobile plants, raised several appendages for quiet. It took a full minute to restore order. Ambassador Ortiz, the speaker said in their translated voice that sounded like wind through leaves. The council has reviewed the incident at Tau Station. We have questions. I am happy to answer them, Helen said. A representative from the Yathari, the insectoid species, clicked their mandibles together nervously. Are these weapons truly treaty compliant? They seem devastatingly effective for devices that are not classified as weapons. Helen pulled up the relevant treaty sections on the main display. Section 47, subsection 12 defines weapons by their technological sophistication and energy signatures. Section 19, subsection 4 specifies that banned weapons must utilize advanced power sources or chemical propellants. Section 8. Subsection 21 lists specific technologies that constitute weapons under this treaty. She highlighted each section as she spoke. Nowhere in the treaty does it ban purely mechanical devices that operate on basic physical principles. Our crossbows use tensioned springs. Our trebuchets use counterweights and leverage. Our projectiles are solid matter with no guidance systems or explosives. By the exact wording of the treaty, they are not weapons. They are tools. The Draven, representative, filling in for High Minister Vrath, who had refused to attend, slammed their fist on their desk. This is legal trickery. The spirit of the treaty was to ban all warfare. Was it? Helen asked calmly. Because the treaty my government signed specifically allowed species to maintain defensive capabilities. It banned certain technologies, not defense itself. If the Draven Empire had read the treaty as carefully as we did, you would have noticed the same loopholes. Professor Nim, a physicist from a species of small furred beings, raised a paw for attention. Ambassador Ortiz, could you explain the tactical effectiveness of these weapons? My understanding of modern warfare suggests that mechanical projectiles should be inferior to energy weapons in every way. Helen gestured to Colonel Hayes, who stood nearby with several other human military advisors. Hayes stepped forward and activated a holographic display showing the physics involved. Modern space combat has evolved around certain assumptions, Hayes began. Energy weapons are fast and powerful, but require time to charge and generate significant heat signatures. Missiles are effective, but can be tracked and intercepted. All modern defenses are optimized for these threats. Shields stop energy. Point defense tracks heat and emissions. Armor dissipates thermal damage. He brought up a simulation showing a crossbow bolt in flight. A solid projectile has none of these characteristics. It generates no heat signature after launch. It emits no energy. It follows a ballistic trajectory that cannot be altered, which makes it predictable in theory, but in practice, it is too fast and too small to intercept reliably. And when it hits a shield designed for energy weapons, the shield does nothing because there is no energy to oppose. But surely armor stops these projectiles, another representative asked. Hayes shook his head. Armor in modern warships is designed to spread thermal damage over a large area. It is relatively thin and relies on shields for primary defense. A tungsten bolt traveling at 2,000 meters per second carries kinetic force that thin armor cannot stop. It punches through like the armor is not there. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Representatives consulted with their military advisors. Some looked worried. Others looked thoughtful. A few looked like they were already planning to acquire their own mechanical weapons. Ambassador Prill of the Athari approached Helen during a recess. The insectoid diplomat moved with the careful precision of her species. Ambassador Ortiz, my government wishes to discuss a possible exchange of information. We have neighbors who have been aggressive toward our borders. Your tactics might be useful for our defense. I would be happy to discuss that, Helen said. Earth is interested in building good relationships throughout the galaxy. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting with our military advisors and yours? That would be acceptable, Prill said. Her compound eyes reflected the light in complex patterns. Between us, many species are reconsidering their defense strategies. The Draven have been bullies for decades, protected by their military superiority. You have shown that superiority was built on assumptions that could be challenged. Over the next several days, Helen met with representatives from more than 20 species. Some wanted to buy human weapons. Others wanted to license the technology. A few wanted to form mutual defense pacts. Earth had gone from being a newcomer barely worth noticing to being courted by half the galaxy. William Chen's company, Chen Defense Solutions, saw its value increase by several thousand% in a single week. Orders came in from governments, private security firms, and even some wealthy individuals who wanted crossbows as status symbols. William hired 500 new employees and opened 3 new production facilities. On Earth, the media covered the story endlessly. The battle at Tau Station was analyzed from every angle. Historians gave interviews about medieval warfare. Engineers explained the physics. Military experts debated the implications for galactic security. Children played with toy crossbows and pretended to be space marines, but not everyone was happy. The Draven Empire was humiliated. High Minister Vrath had not made any public appearances since the battle. Draven military commanders were reportedly conducting intensive reviews of their tactics and defenses. Their propaganda networks claimed the battle had been a fluke, that humanity had gotten lucky, that the next engagement would end differently. Helen knew better. The intelligence reports coming from Draven space told a different story. The Draven were panicking. They were trying to develop countermeasures to mechanical weapons. They were redesigning their shields and armor. They were training their troops in close combat techniques that had not been used in centuries. And most concerning, they were assembling the largest fleet in Draven history. Colonel Hayes brought the intelligence report to Helen's office late one evening. The document was marked with the highest security classification. Long-range surveillance has detected massive fleet movements in Draven space. They are pulling ships from every sector. Best estimate is they are assembling a force of over 200 warships. Helen read through the report carefully. Where are they going? Unknown yet, but the strategic analysts think there are only two logical targets. Either they are planning a massive attack on Tau Station and our outer colonies, or... Hayes paused. Or they are coming for Earth directly, Helen finished. It would be a show of force, Hayes said. A way to restore their prestige. They would not need to destroy Earth, just demonstrate that they could. Defeat us in our home system and the galaxy would forget the embarrassment at Tau Station. Helen set down the report and looked at the star map on her wall. Earth was marked with a blue light, surrounded by a handful of colonies. The Draven Empire, sprawled across a huge section of the galaxy marked in red. Dozens of systems, hundreds of billions of citizens, a military force that had conquered world after world. How long until they are ready to move? She asked. 3 weeks, maybe 4. They are still gathering forces from their outer territories. And how long until we can be ready? Hayes smiled. Ambassador, we have been ready since before the treaty was signed. The question is not if we can defend Earth. The question is how much we want the lesson to hurt. Helen understood. The battle at Tau Station had been a demonstration, a warning shot. But if the Draven brought their full might to Earth's doorstep, the response would need to be proportionate. Not just a tactical victory, but a strategic defeat that would make the Draven reconsider everything about their approach to warfare. We need to send a message, Helen said. Not just to the Draven, but to every species that thinks they can push humanity around because we are new to the galaxy. We need to show them that there are consequences to aggression. What are you thinking? Hayes asked. Helen turned from the star map to face him. If the Draven want to attack Earth, let them come. But we do not fight them here. We take the fight to them. We show them what siege warfare really means. Hayes' eyes lit up with understanding. A siege of their homeworld. Why not? They want to demonstrate power by threatening our home. We demonstrate power by neutralizing theirs. Not through destruction, but through isolation. Cut off their orbital infrastructure. Shut down their supply lines. Make it clear that we could destroy everything they have, but we are choosing not to. That we are showing restraint even when we hold all the advantages. It would be provocative, Hayes warned. Good, Helen said. Humanity has been apologizing for existing ever since we joined the galactic community. We have been trying to fit in, to not make waves, to be good neighbors. Maybe it is time we reminded everyone that being friendly does not mean being weak. Hayes nodded slowly. I will begin preparations. We will need a significant fleet, more siege equipment, specialized ships for orbital control. This will be larger than anything we have done before. Do it, Helen said. And Colonel, make sure every news network in the galaxy is watching. I want everyone to see what happens when you force humanity to defend itself. I want them to see that our weapons might be old, but our strategic thinking is very current. As Hayes left to begin planning, Helen sent a message to the Galactic Council. It was brief and formal, but its content would shake the political foundations of the galaxy. Earth has received intelligence of Draven military buildup near our borders. We consider this a hostile action and a violation of multiple non-aggression treaties. In response, Earth is preparing defensive and deterrent operations. All actions will be conducted within the boundaries of the Armament Control Treaty. Any attempt to interfere will be considered an act of war. The message went out on public channels. By morning, every government in the galaxy would know that humanity was done playing defense. The Draven had wanted to teach Earth a lesson about power. They were about to learn one instead. High Minister Vrath watched the human fleet arrive through the observation window of his palace. The vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, appearing in orbit around his homeworld like they had every right to be there. Massive cargo haulers, converted colony ships, military escorts bristling with mechanical weapons that should have been laughable but were anything but. How many ships? Vrath demanded. Governor Shith, his civilian administrator, consulted her datapad with trembling hands. 73 vessels confirmed. More may be arriving. They are taking up positions around our orbital infrastructure. 73 human ships. It was not enough to match the Draven home fleet, which numbered over 150 warships. But Vrath had watched the footage from Tau Station. He had read the tactical analyses. He knew that numbers might not matter as much as they should. Status of our defenses? All orbital stations are at full alert. The home fleet is moving to intercept. Ground-based defense systems are powered up and ready. We have superiority in numbers and firepower, High Minister. We should be able to drive them off. Vrath noticed she said should instead of will. Even his own people were losing confidence. A communication request came from the human fleet. Vrath considered ignoring it, but that would show weakness. He accepted, and a human woman appeared on the screen. Not Ambassador Ortiz, but someone new. A military commander with hard eyes and complete confidence. High Minister Vrath, I am Commander Riley Brooks of the Earth Defense Force. We are here to discuss terms. You dare come to my homeworld with threats? Vrath growled. This is an act of war. My fleet will destroy every one of your ships. You are welcome to try, Brooks said calmly. But before you do, I suggest you look at what we brought with us. The human vessels opened their cargo bays. Inside were mechanical devices on a scale that made the equipment at Tau Station look like toys. Trebuchets large enough to launch small vehicles, ballistas that could fire bolts the size of shuttlecraft, and thousands of smaller weapons all aimed at the orbital stations that kept the Draven homeworld connected to the galaxy. We are not here to destroy your world, Brooks continued. We are here to demonstrate what siege warfare means in the modern age. You have orbital habitats housing 3 million citizens. You have manufacturing stations, communication relays, defense platforms, and trade hubs. All of that infrastructure is vulnerable to weapons that your defenses were not designed to stop. You would attack civilians? Vrath demanded. We would attack infrastructure, Brooks corrected. Specifically, we would isolate your planet from the rest of the galaxy, cut your supply lines, disable your stations, and we would do it while remaining completely within the boundaries of the Armament Control Treaty. No energy weapons, no explosives, just physics and patience. Vrath felt his chest tighten. She was not threatening invasion. She was threatening something worse. A slow strangulation of his entire world's connection to galactic society. You are bluffing, he said. The Galactic Council would intervene. Brooks smiled. Would they? We are not violating any treaties. We are conducting defensive operations in response to your planned attack on Earth. Every action we take is legal. The Council might debate and discuss, but by the time they reach any conclusions, your orbital infrastructure will be completely neutralized. On the tactical displays in Vrath's command center, the Draven home fleet moved into position. 150 warships against 73 human vessels. The numbers favored the Draven. But the humans did not look worried. The first exchange happened within minutes. The Draven fleet commander, eager to restore honor after the embarrassment at Tau Station, ordered an immediate attack. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes launched toward the human ships. The human shields held better than expected. They were not advanced shields, but they were adequate. And while the Draven attacked with their impressive weapons, the human ships began their own assault. Trebuchets launched clouds of projectiles. Thousands of ball bearings spread out in precise patterns, creating zones of space that were too dangerous for ships to enter. Any vessel flying through those clouds would be hit by dozens of impacts, each one carrying enough kinetic force to damage systems and tear through unshielded areas. Ballistas fired their massive bolts at the orbital stations. The bolts were too large to miss and too fast to intercept. They struck shields that did nothing to stop them and armor that was never designed for kinetic impacts. Station after station reported damage. Hull breaches, system failures, casualties, but the humans did not target life support. They did not aim for the habitats where civilians lived. They targeted communication arrays, docking facilities, power distribution systems, infrastructure that could be repaired but would take months to restore. Commander Brooks's voice came over the general communication channel, broadcasting to every ship and station in the system. All Draven vessels, stand down. We do not want to cause unnecessary casualties. Our objective is to demonstrate that your offensive capabilities can be neutralized. Stop your attack and we will stop ours. The Draven fleet commander ignored the offer and pressed the attack. More energy weapons. More plasma torpedoes. Several human ships took damage, but they held formation and continued their methodical destruction of orbital infrastructure. On the surface, High Minister Vrath watched his orbital empire crumble. A manufacturing station went dark as its power systems were destroyed. A communication relay stopped transmitting after a bolt tore through its central antenna. A trade hub lost its docking capability when a spread of projectiles shredded its external grapples. High Minister, Governor Shith said quietly, we need to consider negotiation. They are not trying to kill our people. They are making a point. The point being what? Vrath snapped. That they can destroy us? No, Shith said. The point is that they can destroy us and are choosing not to. They could target our habitats. They could aim for maximum casualties. Instead, they are being surgical, precise. They are showing restraint while demonstrating overwhelming capability. Vrath looked at the tactical display. His fleet was still firing, but they were doing minimal damage to the human vessels. Meanwhile, his orbital infrastructure was being systematically dismantled, not destroyed but disabled. The difference was important. A new communication came from the human fleet. This time it was Ambassador Helen Ortiz. She appeared professional and calm, sitting in what looked like a command center. High Minister Vrath, this siege can end right now. Order your fleet to stand down. Withdraw your forces from near human territory. Pay reparations for the attack on Tau Station. And agree to a non-aggression pact with Earth and our allies. Do this and we will withdraw immediately and assist in repairing the damage to your stations. And if I refuse? Vrath asked. Then we continue, Ortiz said simply. We have enough supplies and ammunition to maintain this siege for months. Your people on the surface will not be harmed, but they will be cut off from the galaxy. No trade, no communication, no support from your other worlds. Eventually your economy will collapse. Your government will lose legitimacy, and your empire will fracture. All while we sit up here, completely within the bounds of galactic law, waiting for you to see reason. Vrath closed the connection and looked at his advisors. They all avoided his gaze. They knew the truth. The Draven Empire had picked a fight with a species that fought by different rules. Rules that made sense. Rules that worked. Governor Shith spoke again. High Minister, we built our empire on the assumption that advanced technology meant military superiority. The humans have proven that assumption wrong. They have better strategic thinking. They understand that warfare is not just about who has the biggest weapons. It is about using the right weapons for the right situation. You want me to surrender, Vrath said. I want you to make peace, Shith corrected. There is a difference. Surrender implies defeat without dignity. Peace implies recognizing reality and adapting to it. We can rebuild our relationship with humanity. We can learn from them, or we can watch our orbital infrastructure get destroyed piece by piece while the galaxy laughs at us. Vrath stood silent for a long time. Outside, another orbital station went dark. Below, on the surface, millions of citizens watched the battle in the sky and wondered why their mighty empire could not stop weapons that looked like they belonged in a museum. Finally, Vrath made his decision. He opened a communication channel directly to Ambassador Ortiz. I agree to your terms, he said. The words tasted bitter, but they were necessary. I will order my fleet to stand down. I will withdraw forces from human territory. We will pay reparations, and we will sign your non-aggression pact. Ortiz nodded. I will need that in writing, High Minister. And I will need you to make a public statement acknowledging the settlement. The galaxy needs to see that this conflict is over. You want to humiliate me further, Vrath said. No, Ortiz replied. I want to establish peace. Humiliation would be continuing this siege until your government collapsed. I am offering you a dignified exit from a conflict you cannot win. Take it, and we can both move forward. Vrath agreed. Within an hour, the formal documents were signed and transmitted. The Draven fleet received orders to withdraw. The human ships stopped their assault and began pulling back to a safe distance. The siege had lasted less than 6 hours. Commander Brooks sent repair drones to help stabilize the damaged stations. Human medical teams offered assistance with casualties. The transition from warfare to cooperation happened with surprising speed, as if both sides were relieved the conflict was over. On Earth, people celebrated. In the Galactic Council, representatives debated the implications. Across the galaxy, military commanders studied the tactics and updated their strategic doctrines. And in orbit around the Draven homeworld, human crews began the process of packing up their siege equipment. They had made their point. They had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of when pushed. And they had done it all while following the letter of the law. Ambassador Ortiz sent a final message to High Minister Vrath before the fleet departed. We did not want this conflict. We wanted peaceful coexistence. But we will not be victims. We will not be bullied. Treat us with respect and we will be your greatest allies. Threaten us, and you have seen the consequences. The choice has always been yours. The human fleet jumped back to faster-than-light travel, leaving the Draven to repair and reflect. The siege was over, but its lessons would echo through the galaxy for generations. Sometimes the oldest weapons were the best weapons. Sometimes simple solutions beat complex technology. And sometimes the newcomers to the galactic stage had wisdom that everyone else had forgotten. The lecture hall on Pinnacle Station held over 2,000 beings from across the galaxy. Military officers, government officials, weapons designers, and strategic analysts filled every seat. Holographic displays floated above the empty spaces, carrying the presentation to viewers on 100 different worlds. This was the largest military symposium in galactic history, and everyone wanted to hear what the humans had to say. Colonel Robert Hayes walked onto the stage to respectful silence. 6 months had passed since the siege of the Draven homeworld. 6 months of analysis, debate, and fundamental changes in how the galaxy thought about warfare and defense. Good morning, Hayes began. I want to start by acknowledging something important. Humanity did not invent mechanical warfare. We did not create some revolutionary new concept. What we did was remember something that most of the galaxy had forgotten. We remembered that the basic laws of physics do not change just because technology advances. He activated the first holographic display, showing footage from the Battle of Tau Station. Crossbow bolts striking Draven warships, trebuchets launching projectiles that shields could not stop, medieval weapons defeating modern defenses. For the past 1,000 years, galactic warfare has followed a predictable pattern. Energy weapons became more powerful. Shields became stronger to counter them. Missiles became more sophisticated. Point defense systems evolved to intercept them. Each advancement led to a counter-advancement, creating an arms race that the Armament Control Treaty tried to stop. Hayes changed the display to show the treaty document. But the treaty had an assumption built into it. The assumption was that mechanical weapons were obsolete, that no one would use crossbows and trebuchets in space warfare, because they were too primitive, too slow, too limited compared to modern weapons. He smiled slightly. Humanity looked at that assumption and asked a simple question. Is it true? And the answer we found was no. It was not true at all. The display changed to show physics equations, kinetic energy, momentum, velocity calculations. A crossbow bolt traveling at 2,000 meters per second carries enormous kinetic energy. More than enough to penetrate modern hull armor. It generates no heat signature, no energy reading, no electronic signal. It is invisible to sensors designed to track modern weapons. And shields built to deflect energy cannot stop solid matter following ballistic trajectories. Ambassador Prill of the Athari raised a limb for attention. Colonel Hayes, your tactics have been studied extensively over the past months. Multiple species, including my own, have adopted mechanical weapons for defense. But there is concern that we are abandoning technological progress for outdated methods. That is a fair concern, Hayes said. And I want to address it directly. We are not suggesting that anyone abandon technology. What we are suggesting is that you expand your tactical thinking. Energy weapons are still valuable. Missiles are still effective. But by adding mechanical weapons to your arsenal, you create strategic depth. You give yourself options that your opponents might not expect. He brought up a new display showing modern crossbow designs. These are not medieval weapons. These are advanced engineering using modern materials science, carbon fiber composites, titanium alloys, computer-designed springs that store more energy than anything from Earth's history. We took ancient concepts and applied modern knowledge to them. That is not abandoning technology. That is using technology intelligently. Over the next 3 hours, Hayes presented detailed analysis of the conflicts with the Draven. He showed tactical breakdowns, engineering specifications, and strategic considerations. He was completely open with the information, because Earth had nothing to hide. The weapons worked based on physics, and physics was not a secret. After the presentation, he took questions. Military commanders wanted to know about training methods. Engineers wanted specifications. Politicians wanted to understand the legal implications. Hayes answered everything honestly and thoroughly. Later that day, in a private meeting room, Ambassador Helen Ortiz met with representatives from 17 different species. They sat around a conference table that adjusted its chairs to accommodate wildly different body types and sizes. Ambassador Ortiz began a representative from a species of aquatic beings who communicated through translated electronic signals. Our government wishes to establish a formal military cooperation agreement with Earth. We have aggressive neighbors and limited defensive capabilities. Your methods would be useful. We are open to that discussion, Helen said, but I want to be clear about Earth's position. We are not trying to become arms dealers to the galaxy. We are not trying to build a military empire. What we want is to establish ourselves as partners in galactic security. Ambassador Prill clicked her mandibles in agreement. The Yathari have already benefited from human advice. The ballista platforms we installed at our border stations have successfully deterred 3 incursions from our neighbors. They tested our defenses, found them more capable than expected, and withdrew. No shots were fired. The mere presence of effective mechanical weapons prevented conflict. That is the goal, Helen said. Deterrence through capability. Not aggression, but the clear ability to defend yourself. Species that know you can fight back are less likely to attack you. A representative from a small species that resembled bipedal cats spoke up. But what about the broader implications? The Armament Control Treaty is already being revised. Some species want to close the mechanical weapons loophole. Others want to ban warfare entirely. Earth's actions have disrupted the political stability that the treaty was meant to preserve. Helen leaned forward. With respect, that stability was an illusion. The treaty prevented some forms of warfare while allowing others to continue through intimidation and coercion. The Draven Empire was not the only aggressive power in the galaxy. They were just the most obvious. The real stability will come from a balance of power, where every species has the ability to defend itself effectively. The discussions continued for days. Earth signed mutual defense pacts with the Yathari and 3 other species. Trade agreements followed, along with cultural exchanges and scientific cooperation. Humanity's position in the galaxy shifted from newcomers to established partners. William Chen's company, Chen Defense Solutions, became the largest defense contractor in known space. His factories produced weapons for dozens of governments and private security forces. The money flowed back to Earth, funding education, infrastructure, and exploration. Chen himself became one of the wealthiest individuals in human history, though he remained focused on engineering rather than luxury. The Draven Empire, humbled but not destroyed, began its own transformation. Governor Shith became the new High Minister after Vrath was forced to resign. She reached out to Earth with proposals for cooperation and trade. The 2 species that had been enemies months before began building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than intimidation. It is strange, Shith said during a diplomatic dinner with Helen. We spent centuries building our military might. We conquered worlds and demanded tribute. We thought power came from having the best weapons. And then you showed us that power comes from using the right weapons for the right situation. It was a lesson we needed to learn. Helen raised her glass in a toast, to lessons learned and peace maintained. The Galactic Council eventually revised the Armament Control Treaty, but the changes were minimal. The mechanical weapons loophole remained because closing it would open debates about all the other loopholes in the treaty. Instead, the Council established guidelines for proportional response and civilian protection. Warfare did not become illegal, but it became more regulated and less attractive as a solution to disputes. Earth established a military academy on Luna, training officers from across the galaxy in both modern and historical warfare tactics. Colonel Hayes became its first director, teaching courses on strategic thinking, tactical innovation, and the importance of questioning assumptions. Captain Diana Foster received a promotion to Admiral in command of Earth's expanding defense fleet. The fleet now included both human vessels and ships from allied species, creating a joint force that could respond to threats throughout the sector. Sergeant Lucas Grant wrote a book about his experiences boarding Draven vessels with a crossbow. It became a bestseller across multiple species, translated into dozens of languages. The cover showed him in armor, crossbow raised, with the tagline, "Old Weapons, New Wars." 1 year after the siege of the Draven homeworld, a memorial was unveiled on Earth. It stood in a park in Geneva, near the headquarters of Earth's diplomatic corps. The memorial was simple. An ancient English longbow from the medieval period stood next to one of William Chen's modern composite combat crossbows. A plaque between them read, "Technology advances, but physics remains constant. Humanity remembers this." Below that, in smaller letters, "In memory of those who defended freedom with wisdom, courage, and a willingness to think differently." Helen Ortiz stood at the unveiling ceremony, watching as people from Earth and dozens of other worlds came to see the memorial. Children asked their parents what the weapons were. Historians explained the significance. Veterans from the conflicts touched the display case gently, remembering. A message arrived on Helen's personal device. It was from a species on the far side of the galaxy, one that Earth had never directly interacted with. They were facing aggression from their neighbors and wanted advice on defensive strategies. They had heard about humanity's approach to warfare and thought it might help their situation. Helen smiled and forwarded the message to Colonel Hayes with a note. "Another species that needs to learn the old lessons. Can you help them?" Hayes replied almost immediately. "Already scheduling a consultation. We are becoming the galaxy's professors of military history. Strange how things work out." It was strange, Helen thought. 6 months ago, Earth had been a newcomer trying to fit into a galactic community that barely noticed them. Now they were partners, advisors, and respected powers. Not through conquest or intimidation, but through demonstrating that different perspectives had value. That old solutions could solve new problems. That the newest members of the galactic community sometimes had the oldest wisdom. Earth's ships patrolled the space lanes, carrying both energy weapons and trebuchets. Human soldiers trained with both plasma rifles and crossbows. Engineers designed systems that combined advanced technology with mechanical simplicity. It was not a return to the past. It was a synthesis of past and present, creating something stronger than either alone. High above Earth, construction crews worked on a new orbital station. It would serve as headquarters for the Galactic Defense Initiative, a cooperative organization dedicated to maintaining peace through shared security. Multiple species contributed ships, personnel, and resources. Humans provided strategic guidance and tactical training. The station's design included defensive emplacements, energy weapons for long-range threats, missile batteries for guided strikes, and along the outer hull, massive mechanical crossbows that could fire bolts capable of punching through battleship armor, old and new working together. Ambassador Helen Ortiz stood in her office looking out at the construction. She thought about how far humanity had come in such a short time. From barely getting a seat at the galactic table, to helping write the rules for galactic security. Her communication device chimed. Another message, this time from Ambassador Prill. 3 more species have requested training from your military academy. Your approach to warfare is becoming the standard throughout this sector. How do you humans keep finding advantages and limitations? Helen smiled and composed her reply. We have had a lot of practice. Our whole history is finding creative solutions when we are outmatched. We just finally found neighbors who needed to learn that lesson, and we are happy to teach it to anyone willing to listen. She sent the message and returned to watching the construction. The galaxy was changing, old assumptions were being challenged, new partnerships were forming, and humanity, the species that had barely qualified for galactic citizenship a year ago, was helping lead the way, all because someone had read a treaty carefully and asked a simple question. What if we use different weapons? Sometimes the simplest questions had the most profound answers. Sometimes the oldest solutions were the best solutions, and sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. The future stretched out before humanity and its allies, a future built on respect, cooperation, and the understanding that power came not from having the best technology, but from knowing how to use the right tools for the right job. Earth had taught the galaxy a lesson about warfare. Now it would teach them lessons about peace. partnership, and the wisdom that came from remembering history while embracing the future. The memorial in Geneva would stand for centuries, reminding everyone who saw it that progress was not about abandoning the past. It was about learning from it, adapting it, and carrying its lessons forward into whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. And humanity would be ready for those challenges, armed with both ancient wisdom and modern innovation, just as they always had been.